My wealthy grandfather left everything to me. When he died, my family demanded I hand it over. I refused. They kicked me out that night. The next morning, I moved into his estate. When they showed up to evict me, they froze at who was standing beside me. 6 weeks ago, I was just Nate Hayes, 26 years old, guitar instructor at a small music shop downtown. My days were filled with teaching beginners how to strum their first chords and occasionally working with a kid who actually had real talent. My paycheck barely covered rent on my cramped apartment, groceries, and keeping my beat-up sedan running long enough to get me to work each day. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, I wasn't even on anyone's radar really, but I wasn't unhappy either. There's something satisfying about watching a 12-year-old nail a song they've been struggling with for weeks, the way their face lights up when it finally clicks. That was enough for me. I'd come home, practice on my own guitar until my neighbors started banging on the wall, and call it a good day. My parents never understood that. To them, success meant corner offices, expensive cars, and knowing the right people. My decision to teach music instead of climbing some corporate ladder was just another item on the long list of ways I'd disappointed them. The truth is, I always felt like a stranger in my own family. My father, Dennis Hayes, was obsessed with status. Every conversation with him felt like a performance review. My mother, Linda, cared more about appearances than asking how her son was actually doing. And my brother Kyle was the golden child, spoiled, reckless, and somehow always forgiven, no matter how badly he messed up. The only person who ever made me feel like I was enough was my grandfather, William. From the time I was a kid, his estate wasn't just a wealthy man's home to me, it was a sanctuary. I remember running through those marble halls, not caring about the paintings on the walls or how much they were worth. I only cared about the way Grandpa's laughter echoed behind me when I'd challenge him to a race down the hallway. On Sunday afternoons, he'd sit beside me at his grand piano. His fingers were surprisingly quick for a man in his 70s. He'd lean down and say, "Nate, money can buy you an instrument, but it can't buy you the music. That comes from here." And he'd tap my chest right over my heart. I remember asking him once why he never showed off his wealth like my parents did. He just chuckled and shook his head. "Son, the people who need to tell everyone how much they have usually don't have much else worth talking about. Real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the relationships you build, the work you do with your hands, the legacy you leave behind. Everything else is just noise." That stuck with me, still does. Those lessons went way beyond music. Grandpa taught me that wealth was just a tool, not an identity. While my parents spent their whole lives trying to show off what they had, Grandpa lived with quiet dignity. He drove the same black sedan for years, wore suits older than me, never once tried to impress anyone. I spent more weekends at his place than at my own home growing up. We baked cookies in that massive kitchen, played chess by the fireplace, walked through the garden where he'd point out roses he'd planted himself decades ago. He actually listened when I talked about my dreams. Unlike my parents, he never rolled his eyes or changed the subject. I remember one conversation when I was about 16. I'd just told my father I wanted to study music instead of business. He'd basically laughed in my face and told me to stop being ridiculous. That evening, I drove straight to Grandpa's place, still fuming. He found me sitting on the back porch, staring at nothing. Didn't say a word at first, just sat down beside me with 2 glasses of lemonade and waited until I was ready to talk. When I finally told him what happened, he just nodded slowly. "Your father has his own definition of success, Nate. That's his burden to carry, not yours. The question you need to answer isn't what he wants for you. It's what kind of man you want to become. And that's a question only you can answer." I never forgot that. Sometimes I wondered if he knew I didn't really belong with them. If he could see the way my mother flinched whenever I chose to stay at his house instead of going on family vacations. He never said it out loud, but in the way he smiled at me, I always felt like there was a promise in there somewhere. "One day, Nate," he told me once, "you'll understand why I've kept you close." Back then, I just thought it meant he loved me. I didn't realize it was also a warning. It was a Tuesday evening when the call came. I was at my kitchen table grading some practice sheets, half listening to the creaks of my old apartment, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Mr. Hayes?" A man's voice, heavy and official. "This is Officer Daniels from the State Highway Patrol. I'm sorry to inform you that your grandfather, William Hayes, was in a collision tonight. His vehicle was struck by another driver who ran a red light. He didn't make it." The world blurred. My pen slipped from my hand, ink bleeding across the page. Didn't make it. My chest tightened. I refused to believe it. My grandfather wasn't just alive. He was eternal. He was supposed to come to my students' recital next month. He was supposed to call me tomorrow to ask if I'd eaten properly. He couldn't be gone, but he was. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and empty condolences. The estate that had once felt like a safe haven became a stage for hypocrisy. My parents took charge of everything, not out of love, but out of pride. They barked at the funeral director over flower arrangements, scolded the caterers for not bringing high enough quality food. My mother clutched her pearls and said loudly to someone, "Can you believe he drove himself? A man worth billions, and he still acted like a common person." My father stood stiff, jaw clenched, already calculating. His eyes weren't red from grief. They were sharp, restless, like he was doing math in his head. Assets, accounts, stock holdings. And then there was Kyle. My brother leaned against a marble column, scrolling through his phone, sighing like the whole event was an inconvenience. When I asked if he was okay, he just shrugged. "I'll be better once we know what we're getting." I wanted to lose it right there. How could they stand in the same room where Grandpa's life was being honored and talk about money like that? I stood near the casket, staring at his peaceful face. He looked almost asleep, hands folded neatly over his chest. I whispered so no one else could hear. "I'll make you proud, Grandpa. I promise." Arko. But when I looked around, I realized I was the only one who actually felt that way. Relatives who hadn't visited in years wept loudly for the cameras and then stopped the second the photographers packed up. My parents posed for sympathy, but their smiles flickered whenever someone mentioned Grandpa's fortune. When the service ended, I lingered, didn't want to leave him behind. That house, that garden, that piano, they were all haunted now, and I was suddenly very aware that I was completely alone. 2 weeks later, the call came from James Mitchell, my grandfather's lawyer. His voice was calm but firm. "Nate, your grandfather's will is ready to be read. He requested your presence and the presence of your immediate family. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., at my office." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I didn't know it yet, but that meeting would change everything. The next morning, I stood outside James Mitchell's office. The building was an old converted Victorian house, dark wood and stained glass windows casting long shadows. My palms were sweaty. It wasn't raining, but the sky hung heavy with gray. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and coffee. James greeted me with a solemn smile. Silver hair perfectly combed. "Nate," he said softly, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather spoke of you often. He was proud." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." Before I could say more, the door burst open. My parents swept in like they owned the place. My father adjusted his expensive watch with a snap of his wrist. My mother strutted forward in heels that clicked like gunshots against the hardwood floor. Behind them, Kyle slouched and wearing sunglasses indoors at 9 in the morning, shirt half tucked, smirk plastered on his face. "Let's get this over with," my father barked. "We all know how this goes. My father built the empire, and as his only son, I'll be managing it now." James's polite smile didn't falter, but I caught a flicker in his eyes. He gestured for us to follow him into a conference room, where a long oak table waited. I sat near him. My parents claimed the seats at the head like it was already theirs. Kyle sprawled carelessly across a chair, his sneakers on the edge of the table. James cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened a thick leather folder. William Hayes was of sound mind when he updated his will last year. He underwent cognitive evaluations, and I was present for every signing. There is no question of his capacity. My father waved a hand impatiently. Yes. Read it," James began. "I, William Hayes, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my final will and testament. To my beloved grandson, Nate Hayes, I leave the entirety of my estate, financial assets, real estate, investments, and holdings valued at approximately $7 billion. The words hung in the air like thunder. I froze, certain I'd misheard. $7 billion. To me. The room exploded. "What?" My father shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. His face went crimson, veins bulging in his neck. "That's insane. He would never bypass me." My mother clutched the table like it would save her from drowning. $7 billion to a guy who teaches guitar lessons? He doesn't know the first thing about handling money. Kyle ripped off his sunglasses and slammed his palm against the wood. "Where's my cut? I need capital for my new startup. Grandpa promised me." James raised a hand calmly. Mr. Hayes anticipated this response. He made it clear, explicitly, that his decision was intentional. He stated that his son and daughter-in-law had been provided for during his lifetime, and that he wished his fortune to pass solely to Nate. My father's fists trembled. "Lies! You manipulated him, Nate, didn't you?" Whispered in his ear while he was old and confused. I shook my head, fighting back the emotions threatening to break through. "No, I didn't even know he was rewriting his will. I never asked him for anything." James reached for a remote and pressed a button. A large screen on the wall lit up, and suddenly there he was, my grandfather. He sat in his familiar leather chair, hands folded, his voice calm but firm. If you are watching this, it means I've passed. Dennis, Linda, Kyle. I love you as family, but I can no longer ignore what you've become. Greed has blinded you. You see me as a wallet, not as a father, not as a grandfather. Nate is different. He visits because he cares, not because he wants something. He lives with integrity. He will carry my legacy with dignity, my mother gasped. Kyle muttered something under his breath. My father shouted at the screen. This is manipulation. He wasn't thinking straight. But James's voice cut through the chaos. The will is legally binding. Contesting it will be expensive, and given the documentation, nearly impossible. The fury in my father's eyes as he turned to me was enough to chill my blood. This isn't over, Nate. You think you can defy us? You'll regret it. I sat frozen, my grandfather's words still echoing in my ears. He will carry my legacy with dignity. At that moment, I realized the fortune wasn't just money. It was a weight, a test, a responsibility, and my family would do everything in their power to take it from me. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Come home, 6 o'clock. We'll settle this as a family. There was no question mark, no request. It was an order. Part of me almost didn't go. My chest tightened at the thought of walking back into that house. But another part of me hoped, stupidly, that maybe they just needed time to calm down. Maybe grief had twisted their words at the lawyer's office. I was wrong. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. The living room, usually reserved for my mother's social events, looked like a boardroom. My father stood by the fireplace. My mother perched on the edge of a designer chair, eyes cold and sharp. Kyle sprawled across the sofa, laptop open, typing furiously. Sit, my father commanded. I obeyed. My fingers clenched in my lap. My father's voice was steady, but I could hear the rage simmering beneath. You know what you need to do, Nate. Sign the estate over to me. I'll manage it properly. You'll receive a generous allowance, 10%, more money than you'll ever need. 10%? I echoed, my voice trembling. That's over 700 million. My mother cut in smoothly. Enough to buy a mansion. Enough to live like a king. You don't need responsibility, Nate. Leave that to your father. Kyle slammed his laptop shut. 700 million is plenty. I need the rest for my company. Grandpa wanted me to succeed. Don't be selfish. The words hit me like knives. Selfish. Grandpa chose me because I wasn't like this, I said quietly. Because I didn't see him as a bank account. My father's face hardened. He stepped closer, looming over me. This isn't about choice. It's about family loyalty. Either you sign, or you walk out that door with nothing. Do you understand? The silence stretched. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I thought of my grandfather, his laughter, his lessons. The way he told me money was just a tool. I thought of the way he smiled when I played guitar for him. Not because I was perfect, but because I was me. I lifted my chin. No. The room erupted. My mother shot to her feet, her voice shrill. You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you, private schools, lessons, a roof over your head, and you dare defy us? Kyle sneered. Enjoy being rich and alone. You'll come crawling back once you realize money can't hug you at night. But it was my father's words that cut the deepest. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. If you walk out of this house tonight without signing, Nate, you are no longer my son. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't expect a single ounce of help. You'll be dead to us. My breath caught. Part of me wanted to beg him to take it back, but another part of me, the part my grandfather had nurtured, stood firm. I guess I've been dead to you for years, I said quietly. You never saw me. You only saw what you wanted. My father's face twisted with fury. He grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the front door. My mother followed, shouting orders like a general. Pack a bag. 30 minutes. After that, the locks will be changed. I stumbled into my childhood bedroom. The walls were still lined with old trophies and faded posters. My hands shook as I stuffed clothes into a duffel. I grabbed my passport, my grandmother's old quilt, the photo of Grandpa and me in his garden. As I packed, I looked around the room that had been mine since I was a kid. The posters I'd hung as a teenager, the bookshelf filled with books I'd read a dozen times, the corner where I used to sit and practice guitar until my fingers ached. None of it mattered to them. None of it ever had. I wasn't their son. I was just someone they tolerated, someone they kept around because it was expected. And now that I wasn't useful to them, now that I wouldn't roll over and give them what they wanted, I was disposable. The realization should have hurt more than it did. But honestly, it just confirmed what I'd always suspected deep down. When I returned to the hallway, my father was waiting, arms crossed, eyes cold. He opened the front door and gestured outward. Out! The night air was icy as I stepped onto the porch. My bags felt heavier than they were. My mother's voice followed me out. You'll regret this, Nate. Money won't keep you warm. Family is forever. I turned, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. Then why did you just throw me away? The door slammed shut behind me, and just like that, I was homeless. But I wasn't defeated. In my pocket was a small brass key, engraved with my grandfather's initials, the key to his estate, the one place left that felt like home. I gripped it tightly. If they thought they could strip me of everything, they were wrong. This was just the beginning. The drive to my grandfather's estate felt longer than it was. My old sedan rattled along the dark road, headlights cutting through the mist. My duffel bags were piled on the passenger seat, but the only thing I clutched was that small key. My grandfather had pressed it into my hand last year with a wink. Someday you might need this, Nate. I never imagined he meant now. When the iron gates of the Hayes estate came into view, my chest tightened. They rose like sentinels against the night, tall and unyielding. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I really cross that threshold without him here? Would the house feel hollow without his laughter? But then I remembered the slam of my parents' front door, the finality in my father's voice. I had nowhere else to go. This was all I had left. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease. The gates creaked open, and I drove up the winding driveway, lined with old oaks whose branches seemed to bow in welcome. When the estate came into view, my breath caught. Its windows glowed softly, as though the house itself had been waiting for me. I parked in the circular drive and climbed the steps to the front door. My hand trembled as I turned the key. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and the scent hit me instantly. Lemon polish and cedarwood, the same smell I'd known since childhood. For a second, I just stood there in the doorway, breathing it in. Memories flooded back. Sunday dinners in the big dining room, summer afternoons playing in the garden, winter evenings by the fireplace with hot cocoa, while Grandpa told stories about his younger days. This place had always been my real home, even when I didn't want to admit it. I stepped inside. The grand foyer stretched before me, marble floors gleaming under the chandelier. My shoes echoed loudly, as if the house were aware of my arrival. I half expected my grandfather to appear at the top of the stairs, scolding me for being late to Sunday dinner. But the silence was deafening. "Mr. Nate!" I jumped, nearly dropping my bag. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with silver-streaked hair, dressed in a neatly pressed uniform. Recognition flooded me. "Walter?" My voice cracked. He smiled faintly, lines deepening around his kind eyes. "Yes, sir. I've been with your grandfather for over 25 years. His gaze softened. "And now, I suppose, I'm with you." Emotions swelled in my throat. I thought everyone would be gone. I thought I'd be alone. Walter shook his head firmly. Mr. Hayes anticipated trouble. He told me, "If anything happens, you protect Nate. He is the true heir." He left detailed instructions. Of course he had. My grandfather was always 5 steps ahead. Walter led me into the study where a fire was already crackling. "I keep the house running," he explained. "Your grandfather insisted it remain ready no matter what. He said one day you might need sanctuary here." I sank into one of the leather chairs, the flames warming my chilled skin. For the first time all night, I felt the weight of safety, but it was fleeting. "What happens now, Walter?" I asked quietly. "My family. They won't let this go. They already threatened me." His expression darkened. "They came here once, after the funeral, tried to take things. Jewelry, documents. I stopped them. But Mr. Hayes knew they'd be back. That's why he prepared. You'll see. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Walter nodded. "Mr. Mitchell, the lawyer, will visit. There are files, recordings, even letters your grandfather left for you. He built a wall of protection around you, Nate. But you must stand firm." I leaned back, clutching the quilt I'd carried from my childhood bedroom. The house hummed with life around me, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the crackle of the fire, the faint whir of security cameras I hadn't noticed before. For the first time since the will reading, I felt something stronger than fear, resolve. If my family wanted war, they would find I wasn't alone. My grandfather's estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, a legacy, and I was ready to defend it. That night, I slept in the guest room I'd always used as a kid. The sheets were freshly laundered. A book I'd left months ago still sat on the nightstand, bookmark tucked neatly inside. It was as if my grandfather had known I'd return. Not as a visitor, but as the one who belonged. I woke the next morning to the sound of voices downstairs. For a moment, I panicked. Had my family already found me? I grabbed my phone and crept to the landing, only to see Walter at the front door, speaking calmly to a familiar figure. "Mr. Nate," Walter called gently. "It's Mr. Mitchell." Relief washed over me. James Mitchell stepped inside, briefcase in hand, face serious but warm. He looked around the estate like he'd been here countless times. "Your grandfather trusted me with more than his will," he said, setting his case on the dining table. He trusted me with you. I followed him into the study. Sunlight spilled across the mahogany desk. He opened the briefcase and withdrew a thick envelope, sealed with my grandfather's initials. He wrote you letters, James explained. Guidance, instructions, and warnings. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were neatly typed pages, each one signed in my grandfather's steady hand. Nate, the first letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone. I know your father and mother will come for you. Do not give in. I have prepared for this moment. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. You will not stand alone. I have gathered people who care for you, people who will protect you when blood turns against you. Trust them as you trusted me. As if on cue, Walter reappeared with a guest, a woman in her 50s, dressed in a simple cardigan, carrying a folder of documents. This is Helen Brooks, James said. Your grandfather's housekeeper for over 20 years. She's practically family. Helen's eyes welled up as she hugged me. Oh, Nate, you look just like your mother did when she was young, before greed hardened her. Your grandfather adored you. She laid the folder on the table. These are journals your grandmother kept, records of every visit, every demand your father made, every kindness you offered. They prove why your grandfather made his decision. I flipped through one. My grandmother's handwriting danced across the page. Dennis came again asking for money. When we said no, he stormed out. Nate arrived later with soup. He stayed until William's fever broke. Every entry was like a knife and a bomb at once. Painful proof of my parents' neglect, but undeniable validation of my bond with my grandparents. Before I could absorb it, another knock came at the door. Walter returned with a tall woman carrying a laptop bag. This is Carmen Reyes, James introduced. Your grandfather's business partner. She knows Hayes Industries inside and out. Carmen gave me a firm handshake. Your grandfather left me instructions to help you understand the company. He wanted you to know not just where the money came from, but how to protect the people who built it with him. She opened her laptop and displayed spreadsheets, charts, and notes. This isn't just about fortune. Hundreds of employees depend on this empire. He trusted you to uphold his values. Another wave of emotion surged through me. I wasn't just inheriting money, I was inheriting lives. By midday, more allies arrived. Frank Sullivan, the investment advisor, who had managed my grandfather's portfolio for decades. He brought binders full of transparent records showing just how carefully Grandpa had planned. The man had thought of everything. Contingency plans for contingency plans. Legal protections layered so deep, it would take an army of lawyers years to untangle them. Eddie Santos, the estate manager who had overseen maintenance of the grounds. He revealed updated security footage, cameras my grandfather had ordered installed after suspecting my father's intentions. Eddie walked me through the entire security system, showing me how every entrance was monitored, how motion sensors covered the perimeter, how the footage was backed up to multiple secure locations that my family would never be able to access or tamper with. Your grandfather didn't trust them, Eddie said plainly. He told me once that blood doesn't always mean family. Sometimes the people who share your last name are the ones you need to watch out for the most. Judge Thomas Warren, a family friend who greeted me with a solemn nod. Your grandfather asked me personally to act as a neutral witness if disputes arose. I will not let his wishes be twisted. He was a man of principle, and I intend to honor that. The room filled with voices, papers, evidence. For hours, they explained everything my grandfather had done. Every detail, every precaution. It was like a thread woven into a net designed to catch me if I fell. When the last binder was closed, I sat overwhelmed. He knew this would happen, I whispered. James placed a hand over mine. Yes, and he trusted you to be stronger than them. Walter straightened his shoulders. Your father came here after the funeral, tried to take jewelry and documents. He won't stop. He'll come back, and he'll bring the others. But this time, Nate, you'll be ready. The fire crackled in the hearth. I looked around the room at the faces. Loyal, determined, united. They weren't my blood, but in that moment, they felt more like family than anyone I'd ever known. I wiped my eyes and stood. If they want to come for me, let them. I won't run. I won't give up what Grandpa entrusted to me. Helen's hand squeezed mine. That's the spirit. He'd be proud. That night, I lay in the master bedroom, staring at the carved ceiling beams. For the first time, I understood the full weight of my inheritance. It wasn't just about surviving my family's rage. It was about protecting everything my grandfather built and proving I was worthy of his trust. And deep down, I knew tomorrow would bring the first true test. The morning air was heavy, almost electric, as though the world itself was bracing for a storm. Walter had stationed himself near the front door, shoulders squared like a soldier awaiting battle. Helen bustled in the kitchen, her movements calm but deliberate, as if baking muffins could soften the edges of war. By 9, The estate was alive with allies. James spread documents across the dining table, highlighting legal clauses and signatures. Carmen set up her laptop, projecting financial charts that proved how carefully Grandpa had managed the empire. Judge Warren sat near the fireplace, his presence alone radiating authority. I stood at the center of it all, heart pounding, palms slick. "They're coming," I whispered. As if summoned by the words, tires crunched over gravel. Multiple cars pulled into the driveway, sleek, expensive vehicles gleaming like predators. My stomach lurched. The pounding on the front door rattled the chandelier. "Open up, Nate!" my father's voice boomed. "You've had your fun, but this is over." Walter glanced at me. I nodded, forcing my breath steady. He unlocked the door and swung it wide. My family spilled inside like a flood. My father led the charge, face red, veins bulging. My mother swept in behind him, lips pursed in disdain. Kyle dragged his feet, but his eyes burned with greed. "This is still our house," my father barked. "You have no right to shut us out." I stood tall, though my knees trembled. "Grandpa gave this to me, legally, morally, every way that matters." Kyle sneered. "Don't play innocent. You manipulated him. He wasn't thinking straight. Everyone knows $1 billion empire belongs to the family, not some broke guitar teacher." James rose calmly, holding up a folder. "Actually, William Hayes anticipated these accusations. He left written and video statements clarifying that Nate was of sound character and that his decision was deliberate. Contesting this would be futile." My father snatched the folder, flipping pages furiously. "Fabricated," he spat. "You think a judge will take this over the word of his own son?" "Depends on which judge." A deep voice interrupted. All eyes turned as Judge Warren stepped forward. "And unfortunately for you, Dennis, I am one of them. Your father asked me personally to oversee any disputes. These documents, this evidence, it's airtight. You won't win." The color drained from my father's face. But rage quickly replaced fear. He jabbed a finger at me. "Ungrateful brat. You're tearing this family apart." I swallowed hard, my voice trembling, but firm. "No. You did that long ago when you chose money over love." It was the first time I'd ever spoken to my father that way. The first time I'd ever stood my ground without backing down, without apologizing, without trying to smooth things over to keep the peace. And you know what? It felt good. Not in a petty way. In a way that felt like I was finally honoring the man my grandfather had always believed I could be. My mother's composure cracked, her voice rising shrill. "After everything we gave you, private schools, lessons, vacations, you repay us like this? $7 billion belongs to the Hayeses, not to you alone." Helen emerged quietly from the side, holding a small box. "Actually, Mrs. Hayes, your son belongs here more than anyone. These are journals your mother-in-law kept. Every visit, every demand, every kindness. They prove exactly why William made his choice." My mother froze as Helen handed the box to James. He pulled out a page and read aloud. "Dennis demanded money again. When we refused, he shouted that we were stingy fools. Nate came later with soup and stayed until William's fever broke." The room went silent except for the crackling fire. Kyle suddenly lunged forward, slamming his hands on the table. "Enough. We don't care about your stupid journals, Nate. Just sign the transfer. I need capital for my new platform." "Grandpa would have wanted me to succeed." Carmen's voice cut sharp as glass. "He already gave you chances, Kyle. Multiple failed ventures, each one burning through money. Your grandfather refused for a reason, because you never earned it." Kyle's face turned crimson. He turned on me. "You think you're better than me? You'll choke under this pressure. You'll come begging for help." I stood, fire rising in my chest. "No, Kyle. For the first time, I'm not the one begging." My father exploded, sweeping documents off the table, scattering them across the floor. "This is garbage. None of this changes the truth. This fortune is mine. By right." "By right?" Judge Warren thundered. "Your father's will is law. You have no claim, Dennis. None." And then, as if fate wanted the final word, Walter stepped forward, a USB drive in his hand. "Mr. Hayes had me install new security cameras last year. They recorded something you should see." James plugged it into Carmen's laptop. Footage flickered to life on the screen. My father, mother, and Kyle rifling through drawers in the estate days after the funeral, stuffing jewelry and documents into bags. My mother gasped. That's taken out of context." A police chief who had slipped in quietly through the back stepped forward now, arms crossed. "Context won't matter in court. Theft is theft. You're one step away from handcuffs." For the first time, my father faltered. His bluster shrank, shoulders sagging. My mother's hands shook. Kyle backed away from the screen. I seized the moment, my voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm done being afraid of you. Grandpa trusted me. You can threaten, scream, steal, but you'll never take his legacy. Not from me. Silence. Then my father's voice, broken and venomous. If you walk this path, Nate, you are no longer part of this family. I met his eyes. Steady. You made that choice the moment you tried to destroy me. The estate seemed to exhale as they turned one by one and stormed out. Their footsteps echoed down the marble hall. Doors slamming. Engines roaring as their cars disappeared down the drive. I stood frozen, chest heaving. My knees threatened to give out. But then I felt a hand on my shoulder. James's calm, steady grip. You did it, he murmured. You stood your ground. For the first time, I believed him. The week after they stormed out, my father filed a lawsuit anyway, contested the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. James called me with the news, but he was laughing. They hired a third-rate attorney who clearly didn't do his homework. We have video depositions, cognitive evaluations, and sworn statements from 3 independent physicians. This case won't survive the first hearing. He was right. 6 weeks later, the judge threw it out, dismissed with prejudice. My father's attorney tried to argue that Grandpa had been manipulated, but when James played the video of Grandpa calmly and clearly explaining his reasoning, the judge actually shook his head in disbelief. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, looking directly at my father, your father was clearly of sound mind. This appears to be nothing more than a waste of the court's time. My father's face went purple. He tried to stand and object, but his own lawyer pulled him back down. But they weren't done. 2 weeks after that, I got a call from the police chief, who'd been at the estate during the confrontation. Turned out my family had tried to return the stolen items quietly, hoping to avoid charges. The chief wasn't having it. We recovered jewelry worth about $200,000 and several financial documents they'd taken, he told me. Your father's claiming it was a misunderstanding, that he thought the items belonged to him. I had a choice to make. Press charges and drag this into criminal court, or let it go. I pressed charges. Not because I wanted revenge, because my grandfather had taught me that actions have consequences. My father had spent his entire life skating by without ever facing any. That ended now. The DA offered them a deal. Plead guilty to misdemeanor theft, pay restitution, and complete community service. No jail time, but it would be on their record. My mother reportedly cried for 3 days straight. Kyle had to postpone his startup launch because no investor wanted to touch someone with a theft conviction. My father's country club membership was quietly revoked. I didn't feel bad about any of it. 3 months after the confrontation, I launched the William Hayes Foundation for Education and Community. We dedicated $2 billion to scholarships, schools, and local programs in underserved areas. The opening ceremony was held at a community center in the same neighborhood where I used to teach guitar lessons. I stood on stage looking out at hundreds of faces, kids I'd taught, parents who'd scraped together money for their children's lessons, teachers who'd been fighting with underfunded programs for years. I kept my speech short, told them about my grandfather, told them what he believed in, told them this foundation existed to give opportunities to people who deserved a shot. The first scholarship recipients were announced that same day. 47 students, full rides to State University. I shook each of their hands personally. One kid, maybe 17, grabbed my hand and didn't let go for a few seconds. His eyes were wet. My mom works 2 jobs, he said quietly. She was going to have to work a third to help me pay for school. Now, she doesn't have to. That moment was worth more than any number in any bank account. Over the next few months, things moved fast. Carmen helped me restructure Hayes Industries to improve employee benefits. We raised wages for the lowest paid workers by 18%, added better healthcare options, started a profit-sharing program that Grandpa had always wanted to implement, but never got around to. The board pushed back at first, told me it would hurt the bottom line. I told them the bottom line wasn't my priority. Taking care of the people who actually built this company was. They got on board real quick after that. I also started hosting Sunday dinners at the estate. Not fancy events, just good food and good company. James came. Carmen, Helen, Walter, Eddie, Frank, some of the company employees and their families too. We'd cook together, eat together, tell stories about Grandpa together. Helen burned the rolls 1 week and blamed me for distracting her. Walter told a story about the time Grandpa accidentally locked himself in his own storage cellar for 4 hours. Carmen's daughter taught me a card game that I'm pretty sure she made up the rules to as she went along. It felt like family, real family. 6 months after everything went down, I ran into my mother at a charity event. She was there with some of her old social circle friends, clearly trying to maintain appearances despite everything that had happened. She saw me across the room. For a second, I thought she might come over, apologize, try to make things right. Instead, she turned her back and walked the other direction. I didn't chase her, didn't call out, just watched her go. Then I went back to my conversation with the foundation's new director of operations. We were planning to expand the scholarship program to 3 more states by the end of the year. I had better things to do than chase people who never wanted me in the first place. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.